sounds like something is fixing to take place in this special, secluded space between your ears, behind your eyes, above your butthole, below your cranium. There's going to be some stuff going on. It might get a little strange up in here.
House nearby, knocked on the door, a lady comes to the door and he says, ma'am, you wouldn't by any chance have any aspirin, would you? And she looked at him, and he's wearing a prison jumpsuit, and she says, you look like you're from that prison gang. She says, are you from that prison camp where they've got that dope fiend Kesey? And he says, ma'am, he says, I am that dope fiend Kesey. Well, you can imagine it was a quick call to the sheriff, and he got reported, and they called him in, and they said, Ken, what the hell were you thinking? Telling me who you were. And he says, I just can't help myself. So I have these fits of compulsive honesty. So that's about truth. We're going to lay down some truth today.
If a tree don't fall on me, I'll live till I die. Here's some more noises.
Right, that seemed to work. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Brother George. Welcome to Wonderland. Now christened Pepperland, the official constitution for all of us here. It was actually written about 150 years ago by the late, great Abe Lincoln. When he first wrote, 200 years ago, our forefathers and pranksters brought forth upon this continent a new idea, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men and women are created equal and playful. Now, we are engaged in a great civil party, testing whether that notion, or any great notion, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. And we are met on the great field of whiz, and have come here to dedicate a portion of this year as a fitting respite from the madness of the madhouse of the nation we find ourselves in. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we could not hallow this scene. The brave men and women who pranked before us have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it will never forget what the pranksters have built here. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who first bust painted have thus far so nobly advanced. It is for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored pranksters we take increased devotion to that cause for which they are still giving the last full measure of devotion. And that we here highly resolve that Jerry and Jack and Neal and Ken shall not have died in vain, but rather that this prankster land, under all the great spirits, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that movements of the pranksters, by the pranksters, for the pranksters, shall not perish from this earth. Welcome to Wonderland 5.0. Right, and this year is also the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. And it was at Woodstock where a lot of us came together for the very first time. And I'm going to read a little story about that, where I first met that wizard over there and a whole bunch of people here. And it happened, this will tell you the whole story. Two of the coolest events of the 1960s came together in the 21st century. And I lived it from start to finish. The Merry Pranksters bus, the original of which pulled out of Ken Kesey's house in La Honda on my June 14th birthday in 1964, came to Max Yasgur's farm where Woodstock was born in 1969. Since then, each of these events, painted buses traveling around full of fun-loving friends and gatherings in fields for weekend concert communes, have become part of worldwide culture. But this is where it all began, with a bang. And this time, it all began with an unplanned dash when the 2014 50th anniversary Kesey crew got canceled last minute out of some other festival and suddenly was headed for Woodstock. Of course, where it should have been going in the first damn place. Home again. Gotta be there on Max's farm, where Woodstock as we know it began, where the Oregon Creamery boys first joined up with the New York dairy farmer. Now, if you don't know the backstory on Max, man, what a guy. He was a respected, if iconoclastic, elder statesman, farmer, and 1,000-acre landowner in this area of Sullivan County, even though he was only 49 years old at the time of the festival. Max was known to speak his mind and go his own way in a conservative, old-world, rural culture, and very much go along, get along people. The Woodstock Festival organizers were kicked off their months in development site just 30 days before the festival was to begin, and Max had been reading in the local papers about the trouble these kids were having and told them when they first met, I want to help you boys. You got the raw end of the deal. And he had a very evolved philosophy of equality and justice, a living 20th century Thoreau, who was a proactive ethicist for whom a handshake was a binding contract, and injustice did not sit well with him. Plus, he was also a pretty sharp businessman. So you picture Woody Allen meets Jack Benny, as Max is noodling around the farm all Woodstock weekend, licking the end of his pencil and jotting down every bucket of milk a cow didn't deliver to make sure he was covered for it. But beyond his pencilings, because it was Max and the respectful relationship they evolved, the promoters spent months and tens of thousands of dollars restoring the land to exactly what it was when they arrived. One story, to give you an idea, and something only his wife Miriam could relate. When word spread that Max was talking to these hippies about having this band festival on his farm, somebody put up a sign along Route 17B in front of his house. Stop Max's hippie festival. Buy no milk. And when Max and Miriam saw it for the first time, as she recalled, I thought, you don't know Max. Now it's going to happen. That did it. He just turned to me and said, is it all right with you? And I knew he was not going to get past this sign. So I said, I guess we're going to have a festival. And he said, yep, we're going to have a festival. And that was it. And that's how Woodstock happened. It's a great moment. It's a great Max and Mary thing. Floating around the Kesey bus were a film crew, appropriately from British Columbia, and all sorts of next-generation pranksters, like Chris Foster, appeared as the Wizard, Carmen Miranda, and a psychedelic cowboy over each of the 3 days. And he actually lives in Bloomington, Indiana, where I just recently summited with Neil Cassidy's son, John, and the film director, Walter Salas, and the on-the-road scroll preserver, Jim Canary, for the on-the-road movie premiere. So all of a sudden, this town showed up the very first time we met. And now here we are still 5 years later. And the spirit of Woodstock was alive and being created by the people, not rock stars or anyone else dictated from on high. It was an organic connection among souls who were driven to drive some distance to spend a formless, wacky weekend in the woods. Not only was no one aggressively drunk, but I never even heard a harsh word spoken over 4 days. And when I heard someone impatient and frustrated in the real world a few days later, it sounded so foreign and out of place and unnecessary. And that's what these things do. The fabric of your soul becomes dipped in a rainbow dye and permanently transformed by the swirling colors of love and happiness and peacefulness, all based on happenstance with a purpose. Who knows what's going to happen or who you're going to meet next? But tossing yourself into this tribal gathering of like-minded adventurers, you'll go lots of somewheres cool. Like the endless jam sessions going on all over the fields with the Grateful Dead dominating the airwaves. And by now, the Woodstockians and pranksters have morphed back into the world. Maybe you can't even recognize who we are. And the bus has continued its trip, tootling the multitudes in Washington and New York and Cleveland and Chicago on the never-ending road trip started by Jack and driven by Neal and jumped on by Jerry and captained by Ken, that's still hugging hearts with loving arms and ever going further. My great road brother. Hey, Manny, so many goddamn great things happen at Wonderland. So I know people are here for the first time. How about that? That's gonna be great. They don't even know how much it's gonna change them yet. 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to meet this guy. George Walker was in the house, and he heard me. George Walker, coming right up here. And he heard me read.
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, he heard me read and says to me sort of in passing, I can do Neal Cassidy, you know. I was like, oh, you can you?
Yes, I can.
So thus we began, which started up in that tent 2 years ago, and then we refrained it right here, a great partnership that has now been going on for whatever it is, 2 or 3 years.
Exactly years.
2 years so far and counting. And it's evolved from that beautiful moment. And so we're going to share a little bit of that evolution with you now. We're also going to do a whole show tomorrow afternoon. So there's that, but here's a taste now. Okay. We're still coming up with this set design and stage work. So this is from On the Road, Jack Kerouac On the Road with Neal Cassidy. I, Jack, drove from South Carolina and beyond Macon, Georgia, as Neal, Mary Lou, and Al slept. All alone in the night, I had my own thoughts and held the car to the white line in the holy road. What was I doing? Where was I going? I'd soon find out. I got dog-tired around Macon and woke up Neal to resume. You got to drive, buddy. I can't keep doing this. I've never had a driver's license in my life. I don't know what I'm doing. And we got out of the car for air, and suddenly both of us were stoned with joy to realize that in the darkness all around us was fragrant green grass and the smell of warm waters.
We're in the South. We've left the winter.
Faint daybreak illuminated green shoots by the side of the road. I took a deep breath. A locomotive howled across the darkness. I took off my shirt and exulted. 10 miles down the road, Neal drove into a filling station with the motor off, noticed that the attendant was fast asleep, jumped out, quietly filled the gas tank, saw to it that the bell didn't ring, and rolled off with a $5 tank full of gas for our pilgrimage. I slept and woke up to the crazy, exultant sounds of music, and Neal and Mary Lou talking, and the great land rolling by. Where are we?
We just passed the tip of Florida, man. Flomaton, it's called.
Florida? We were rolling down to the coastal plain, and up ahead were great soaring clouds of the Gulf of Mexico. It was only 32 hours since we'd said goodbye to everybody in the dirty snows in the north. And we stopped at a gas station, and there Neal and Mary Lou played piggyback around the tanks, and Al Hinka went inside and stole 3 packs of cigarettes without even trying. And rolling into Mobile over the long tidal highway, we all took off our winter clothes and enjoyed the southern temperatures. This was when Neal started telling his life story. And when, beyond Mobile, he came upon an obstruction of wrangled cars at a crossroads, and instead of slipping around them, he just balled right through the driveway of a gas station and went right on without relaxing his steady Continental 70 and left gaping faces behind us. He went right on with his tale.
I tell you, it's true. I started at 9 with a girl called Millie Mayfair in back of Rod's garage on Grant Street, same street Alan lived on in Denver. That's when my father was still barbering a bit. I remember my aunt yelling out the window, "What are you doing back there by the garage?" Oh, honey, Mary Lou, if I'd only known you then. Wow, how sweet you must have been at 9.
He tittered maniacally. He stuck his finger in her mouth and licked it. And he took her hand and rubbed it all over himself, and she just sat there smiling serenely. And big, long Al Hinkle sat looking out the window talking to himself. "Yes, sir, I thought I was a ghost that night." And he was wondering what Helen would say to him when he got to New Orleans. And Neal just went on.
One time I rode a freight from New Mexico all the way to L.A. I was 11 years old. Lost my father at a siding. We were all in a hobo jungle. I was with a man called Big Red. My father was out drunk in a boxcar. It started to roll. Big Red and I missed it. I didn't see my father for months. I rode a long freight all the way to California, really flying, first-class freight, a desert zipper. All the way, I rode over the couplings. You can imagine how dangerous. I was only a kid. I didn't know. Clutching a loaf of bread under one arm, the other hooked around the brake bar. This is no story. This is true. When I got to L.A., I was so starved for milk and cream, I got a job in a dairy. And the first thing I did, I drank 2 quarts of heavy cream, and then I puked.
"Poor Neal," said Mary Lou, and she kissed him. And he stared ahead proudly. He loved her. And we were suddenly driving along the blue waters of the Gulf. And at the same time, a momentous mad thing began on the radio. It was the Chicken Jazz and Gumbo Dick Stocky show from New Orleans. And all the mad jazz records and colored records and the DJ saying, "Don't worry about nothing." And we saw New Orleans in the night ahead of us with joy. And Neal rubbed his hands over the wheel.
Now we're going to get our kicks.
At dusk, we were coming into the humming streets of New Orleans.
Oh, smell the people. Woo!
Yelled Neal with his face out the window sniffing.
Ah, God, life.
And he swung around a trolley.
Yes.
And he darted the car and looked in every direction for
Look
girls.
at her.
And the air was so sweet in New Orleans, it seemed to come in soft bandanas. And you could smell the river and really smell the people and mud and molasses and every kind of tropical exaltation with all your nose suddenly removed from the dry ices of the northern winter. And we bounced in our seats.
And dig her.
Yelled Neal, pointing at another woman.
Oh, I love women. I think women are wonderful. I live for women.
And he groaned and he clutched his head, and great beads of sweat fell from his forehead and from pure excitement and exhaustion. And we bounced the car up under the Algiers ferry and found ourselves crossing the Mississippi River by boat.
Now we must all get out and dig the river and the people and smell the world,
said Neal, bustling with his sunglasses and cigarettes and leaping out of the car like a jack-in-the-box, and we followed. On rails, we leaned and looked at the great brown father of waters rolling down from mid-America like a torrent of broken souls, bearing Montana logs and Dakota muds and something that drowned in Three Forks, where the secret began in ice. Smoky New Orleans receded on one side. Old sleepy Algiers with its warped wood sides bumped us on the other. And men were working in the hot afternoon, stoking the ferry furnaces that burned red below deck and made our tires smell. Neal dug them, hopping up and down in the heat, and he rushed around the deck and upstairs in his baggy pants, halfway hanging down his belly, and suddenly I saw him eagering on the flying bridge. I expected him to take off on wings. I heard his mad laugh all over the boat. And Mary Lou was with him, and he covered everything in a jiffy, came back with the full story, jumped in the car just as everybody was tooting to go, and we slipped off, passing 2 or 3 cars in a narrow space, and found ourselves darting through Algiers for William Burroughs' house.
Which way? Where?
George Walker as Neal Cassidy.
Brian Hassett is Jack Kerouac.
Okay, thanks. We're going to do one more of these. I'm going to keep this thing short. We'll do one more of these. This is about jazz and the music we're going to hear this weekend. It's about all of jazz.
It's all about jazz.
Yeah, close enough for jazz. Okay. It's a great part from Chicago. All right. Great Chicago glowed red before our eyes. We were suddenly on South Madison Street among hordes of hobos. Some of them sprawled out on the street with their feet on the curb, hundreds of others milling in doorways of saloons and alleys.
Whoop, whoop. Look out for old Neal Cassidy there. He may be in Chicago by accident this year.
We let out the hobos on this street and proceeded to downtown Chicago. Screeching trolleys, newsboys, gals cutting by, the smell of fried food and beer in the air, neons winking everywhere.
We're in the big town, Jack. Woo-wee!
The first thing we did was park the Cadillac in a good dark spot and washed up and dressed for the night. Across the street from the YMCA, we found a red brick alley between buildings where we stashed the Cadillac with her snout pointed out to the street and ready to go. And then we followed the college boys to the Y, where they got a room and allowed us to use the facilities for an hour. Neal and I shaved and showered, and I dropped my wallet in the hall. And Neal found it and was just about to sneak it into his shirt when he realized it was ours. And he was right disappointed. And then we said goodbye to the boys, who were glad they'd made it in one piece, and we took off to eat in a cafeteria. Old brown Chicago with its strange semi-Eastern, semi-Western types going to work. Neal stood in the cafeteria rubbing his belly and taking it all in. He wanted to talk to a strange, middle-aged colored woman who had come into the cafeteria with some story about how she had no money, but she had buns with her, and would they give her some butter. She came in flapping her hips, was turned down, and went out flipping her butt.
Woo!
Yelped Neal.
Let's follow her down the street. Let's take her to the old Cadillac in the alley. We'll have a ball.
But soon we forgot that and headed straight for North Clark Street after a spin in the loop to see the hoochie coochie joints and hear the bop. And what a night it was.
Oh, man.
Said Neal as we stood in front of a bar.
Dig the street of life. The Chinaman that cut by in Chicago. What a weird town. Wow, and that woman in that window up there. Big, wide eyes wailing, looking down over their breasts hanging from her big nightgown. Whew! Jack, we gotta go and never stop going until we get there.
Where are we going, man?
I don't know, but we gotta go.
Then here came a gang of young bop musicians carrying their instruments out of cars. And they piled right into a saloon, and we followed them. They set themselves up and started blowing, and there we were. The leader was a slender, curly-haired, pursy-mouthed tenor man, thin of shoulder, draped loose in a sports shirt, cool in the warm night, who picked up his horn and frowned in it and blew cool and complex and was daintily stamping his foot to catch ideas and ducking to miss others and saying, "Wail!" when the other boys took solos. He was the leader, the encourager, the schoolmaker, the Bix, the Louie, in the great formal school of New York, of new underground subterranean American music that would someday be studied all over the universities of Europe and the world. And then there was Prez, a husky, handsome blonde like a freckled boxer, meticulously molded in his sharkskin plaid suit with the long drape and the collar fallen back and the tie undone for exact sharpness and casualness, hitching up his horn and writhing into it, and a tone just like Lester Young himself, blowing round as they all leaned and jammed together, the heroes of the bop generation.
You see, man, Prez has the technical anxieties of a money-making musician. He's the only one who's well-dressed. Obvious big band employee. See him grow worried when he blows a clinker, but the leader, that cool cat, tells him not to worry and just blow truth. The mere sound and serious exuberance of the music is all he cares about. He's an artist. He's teaching young Prez, the boxer. Now the others dig.
And they rolled into a tune, Idaho. The third sax was an alto. 18-year-old, cool, contemplative, young Charlie Parker type from high school with a broad gash mouth, taller than the rest, grave, motionless on the horn, fingering, erect, an idealist who reads Homer and Bird, cool, contemplative. And he raises his horn and blows into it quietly and thoughtfully and elicits bird-like phrases and architectural Miles Davis logics. These were the children of the great bop innovators. Because once there was Louis Armstrong blowing his beautiful top in the muds of New Orleans. And before him, the mad tuba players and trombone kings who paraded on official days and broke up their Sousa marches into ragtime. And then there came swing and Roy Eldridge, vigorous and virile, blasting the horn for everything it had in waves of power and logic and subtlety. Leaning to it with glittering eyes and a lovely smile and sending it out broadcast to rock the jazz world. Then came Charlie Parker, a kid in his mother's woodshed in Kansas City, smoke from stovepipes, wool hats, blowing his taped-up alto among the logs, practicing on rainy days and coming out to watch the old swinging Basie and Benny Moten band that had Hot Lips Page and the rest. Charlie Parker, leaving home and coming to Harlem and meeting Mad Monk and Matter Gillespie. Charlie Parker, in his early days when he was flipped and walked around in a circle while playing, somewhat younger than Lester Young, also from KC, that gloomy, saintly goof in whom the history of jazz was wrapped. For when he held his horn high and horizontal from his mouth, he blew the greatest. And as his hair grew longer and he got lazier and stretched out, his horn came down halfway, till it finally fell all the way. And today, as he wears his thick-soled shoes so that he can't feel the sidewalks of life, his horn is held weakly against his chest, and he blows cool and easy get-out phrases. Here were the children of the American Bop Night.
Brian Hassett, Jack Kerouac.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Neal. Thank you, George.
Thank you all for being here. If it wasn't for your all, it would all been in vain. When we set out to do something, we had no idea what. There was, as people often ask me, well, what was different? And I said, well, there was nothing to do, and there was really nowhere to go. And now there's all of this everywhere, all across the country. Scenes like this every weekend, all summer, every county's got 3 of them. You can't even go to everything. It wouldn't be possible. You'd have to be 6 people to go to everything, or 60 people. And it's because of y'all that it makes it seem to me like it was all worthwhile. And this is what validates what I've dedicated my life to. And so
All right, George Walker.
I thank y'all from the bottom of my heart, and I love every one of you.
Thank you, George. And we're going to be doing a full show tomorrow around 3 o'clock, and George is going to do a full show on Sunday. What you just said, George, reminded me. I was with David Amram, who some of you have met. He was Kerouac's principal musical collaborator, and we did this great show in New York one day. And it's the opening story, I think, in my book, On the Road with Cassidy's book. But after it was over, we were driving home, and I said to David, who sat in with Jack a million times in the '50s and all that, and did Pull My Daisy, and I said, because this was really the best one. This was the best one of these Beat Jack shows we ever did. And I said to Dave, what do you think? How did this compare to what you were doing with Jack? And he said sort of what you did. He kind of leaned over and he didn't want to kind of say it too loud, but he says, Brian, this was better.
Yeah, and he wasn't lying.
Right, that it was a pretty Spartan crowd and all that back then, and it's grown into this thing that's...
It has grown, and it grows, it lives. This lives.
He would have said he hadn't seen it yet if he saw your show last night. Last night's show was over the top.
Well, thank you, Gubba. Thank you, Gubba. Appreciate that. I thought we had a good one last night. I'll say that.
We'll do more. Okay, I want to keep this moving because everybody's hot and we want to keep having fun and all this stuff. So you're not going to believe this. I found a poem that I wrote basically on my 16th birthday. So it's that old, June of '77. And I read this thing and it was like, holy shit, this is Prankster land. You're not going to believe it. I'll just do this thing. And you'll see right away. Because this poem, written when I was 16 years old, 40 fucking years ago, is called Love People versus Mean Things. Love people versus mean things. In the beginning, it took 7 days to get this place working in millions of ways. Then one day Noah, he saw a dove. And one day Jesus, he found love. Now remember now, in the beginning, the team with love is the one that was winning. And in great abundance, time had passed until something big happened at last. It happened in the land where the Henrys had walked, the place where the Thames ran and Big Ben talked. The population had soared through evolution. What was needed? An industrial revolution. Then wouldn't you know it, but out of the woodwork came some mean people to destroy all the good work. To call them people is far too kind. To call them at all, you'd be out of your mind. What they are really is just a mean thing. Mean thing. Yes, I like that. It has a nice ring. These mean things, their idol was a man named Bell. Alexander Graham, they thought was just swell. We all know of his telephone, his pride and his joy. But what we missed out on was his plan or his ploy. He wanted to have phones in our cars, on the wall. He wanted those damn things to be ruling us all. By creating a monopoly, he destroyed competition and then secretly began storing up ammunition. This mock God's idea was to make us all crazy, to make us all frustrated, poor, and lazy. The telephone company had but one foe, a world of people on the go, a group of young'uns who had money, power, and cars. The phone company's foe was the world of rock stars. They were the only people who knew what these mean things were trying to do. So, as you recall, just after the war was when the industry started to soar. The phone company had discovered many a new way to take all the people and every business each day. And about this time, rock and roll began, a brand new art form created by man. They were on our side, love's side, the good guys. They were the only ones who could see through Bell's lies. But rock needed money to put mean things down, so they had to charge prices that made the fans frown. What love needed was to finish off mean, but to do it secretly, not causing a scene. To infiltrate, they needed a man, a guy who was capable of uncovering the plan. A man named Alice was the one who was picked, and he went incognito to find out how they ticked. He was listening outside an office one day when he heard a mean thing bluntly say, "It's time we put Operation X in motion. And let me say now that I have a notion the world, its people, its money, its fate will be in our hands before '88. Alice was shocked, but he stayed at the door. He couldn't leave without hearing more. After being so cruel to us all of these years, they were giving us presents to end all our tears. They were little devices the mean things thought swell. What they were really was the public's last hell. They were the tiniest phones sewn to our arms. Everyone would have one from downtown to the farms. They attached it through wires and nerves to the brain. It was supposed to be great, a real public gain. What it will do is make a phone call, but there's no way to dial or anything at all. How does it work? What does it do? You just think of a number of who to talk to, and it'll connect you up, and that'll be that. It does it all in seconds flat. This great little device has but one snag. After a few days of use, your brain will sag. You'll grow like a computer. You'll lose control. The phone company will begin to take over your soul. It may sound amazing, but it's perfectly true. You must keep a watch or they'll do it to you. There was one other thing Alice heard them say. The plant that controls it is close to LA. And Alice knew we needed a plan. We had to do something to save all of man. A counterattack was what we really needed to get those mean things who had lied and had cheated. We knew the plant, the key was close to LA. We must destroy that plant in any way. Love's meeting to come up with a counterattack was ended when a man stood up in the back. His name was Zappa, and he had a scheme that would put an end to these mean things' dream.
We'll have a huge concert with many a band that would make people come from all across the land. A good thing is, with such a large crowd, we'll need to turn up the music really loud, drawing all power from the plant real quick. We'll blow up their generator, and that'll do the trick.
Frank Zappa. The idea was loved, evidently, and got a unanimous vote. And the meeting ended on this final note. We want to get moving and get this done. We want to put an end to the mean things fun. So the first thing we do was arrange for the power. And this was done quietly by tapping their tower. Then every group came together. Not one did we avoid. From Yes to Dylan, from the Stones to Pink Floyd. Yeah, George got it. They were all assembled on one stage to play 3 nights of power and rage. Just ask a fan. Well, the first 2 days went very well. Just ask a fan, any would tell. The groups were great, undoubtedly the best. But tomorrow night was to be the real test. Emerson, Lake, and Palmer's set had nicely finished. Does that date this to the 70s? Emerson, Lake, and Palmer's set had nicely finished, just as the sun's rays finally diminished. The big third night was finally here, and only 2 groups had yet to appear. The first was to be Bob Dylan and the band, who drove the fans wild exactly as planned. They played for 3 hours, and the music was loud, but one thing made more noise, and that was the crowd. The phone company's generators were working too fast. Anyone could tell that they'd never last. The final group was about to appear. The volume turned up to cover the cheer. The Beatles came back as our ace in the hole. They were here now to help us reach our goal. The fans went crazy. They went insane. The sound turned up to the threshold of pain. Then during a song entitled Let It Be, the generators blew to infinity. The fans never heard it. They're all deaf by now. But boy, we succeeded. We did it, and how. The world's public enemy, number 1, is gone forever. Finished. Done. Love came through, they did it all right. But let me say now, it's not the end of the fight. Mean things are still around. They're here today, and they're out to get love in any way. Rock and roll people are the only ones who know how to save man from the mean things woe. So next time you hear of a rock and roll show, make sure you plan to get tickets and go. All right. So that was Beatles, Mean Things, Blue Meanies, the whole thing. Okay, so then I wrote this book about Woodstock, and I just kind of feel like it's hot and it's all that, and I don't want to kind of keep you guys too long. So I'm gonna just do one little quick thing because it's got some stuff in it, and then I'll do the ending, and that's that. Oh, and is Jeremy Hogan here? Does he make it here? Is he? He was? Because there's something in here that's kind of for him. So this was written 25 years ago. Yeah, this was this book I wrote. Speaking of old stuff, I wrote this 25 years ago. And just recently found it. And it's about Woodstock 94. And there's a few people here. Mike Buck was at Woodstock 94. Wiz was there. A few people. Anybody else at Woodstock 94? No, that was it. Okay, so this is this part, just a real quick part. It's waiting for Dylan to come on. Anyway. Well, anyway. On the upside of our species, occasionally we work well together. A bunch of Homo sapiens gathered here and created a single unified emotion and attitude that can only be made by thousands of people being in the same place, feeling the same way, and bonding through hardship and joy to channel whatever giant force it is that's caught by 500,000 antennas all vibrating at once. Shots of energy were shooting up my spine like electricity. Goosebumps were chilling my arms, and I thought the satellite dishes were impressive. We were beaming signals those things couldn't touch. And if you couldn't taste the tangible human energy vibrating across this human vortex of consciousness, you need to have your acid checked. And suddenly, it was mostly photographers in my subdivision for some reason. Those goalies of the press, the isolated, bemasked soloists who'd face any shot, climb any wall, forge any stream of consciousness to get the picture. I got dizzy watching one guy as he piled one table on top of another on top of a semi-trailer and was up there with his bodysuit of cameras snapping away in the wind like a trapeze artist without a net. As usual, they proved themselves a breed apart in this Breeders' Cup of broadcasting. Picture Woodstock, and you picture a picture. Brought to you by the essence-chasing photography corps of the U.S. Army of Reporters. And don't let any writer ever tell you he knows a thing. Photographers are the ground troops in this war of image, and everything you've ever seen a picture of is something they got to first. I toasted my green, dripping one to their mud-splattered fatigues. So there's just that little thing. I want to just skip to the ending. Thank you. Okay, this is going to blow your mind. This is the whole point of the whole goddamn exercise. Where do I start here? I think here. Okay, this is the crazy thing. So I'm reading this book from 25 years ago, and I'm going, this is describing Wonderland. This is describing what we do at Wiz's every reunion. And it was written about a slightly different setting, but dig this, and it's about you guys, and about us, and about what we're going to do this weekend. All right? This is the ending. The computerized banks of lights were constantly, let me just make sure I'm at the right spot here. Hold on, sorry everybody. Yeah, I think this is it. We're at the stage, we're flowing different colors. The gradual transitions from Van Gogh yellow to Renoir blue to Monet green made you tip forward as one color would pour into the next. And speaking of getting dizzy, there were more naked bodies exposing themselves than there were people. or so it seemed. I could go on and on for pages about it, but it was all a surreal dream. You're at Woodstock. You're walking through an enormous crowd, and you stop and look at the stage, and Peter Gabriel is performing. And you feel good. Everything is wonderful. And you start walking again, but you notice every person in the crowd around you is completely naked. God, it was a weird dream. As the singer's singing about shedding his skin, as massive change was in the air, as every poet kept reminding us all weekend. This wasn't all fun and games. This was life in transition. This next song is for the spirit of Jimi Hendrix. It's called Secret World, I heard Gabriel say, evoking the second most referenced guiding Woodstock light after John Lennon this weekend. But he would have been more on target citing John. I'm sure the following may be sacrilege in some denominations, but all night Gabriel was sounding like the Beatles would if they had kept going. I suppose that's the highest praise you can give a rock and roll band, but tell me Secret World isn't Tomorrow Never Knows at a 90s pace, with his hypnotic cycling rhythm and Lennon's haunting optimism and McCartney's popping bass. And all the while, the band's running around in throbbing strobe lights, which you could watch for about 5 seconds on acid. Oh yeah, I'm on acid. Important parenthetical, yeah. Not now. A couple of hours. And the whole world began pulsating and flashing lights and jerking time with everything staggered and nothing is real. Peter, Paula Cole, and the whole band were doing a Rockettes meet Jaluka South African dance celebration while the strobes turned everything into a silent movie with only a partial view of the dancers every other second, which was, of course, magnified into hours while the on-stage lighting storm kept cracking with snippets of the scientists at work. I had to start moving again. Mud I could handle. Was mostly one color and stayed somewhat still. And people were dancing in bliss, in a transcendental shape-shoal drift. It felt as though Gabriel's set may have ended in here somewhere because I remember wandering what seemed like miles as the crowd kept cheering without music, exploring my way through the vines of peace hanging thick in the air like moss in the bayou, weaving invisible through the clapping arms and whistling fingers until at last I came out on the banks of a deep muddy river that ran through the site, sparkling alive with the starry night spotlights reflecting us back at ourselves. And this giant, gentle Mississippi of ours unassumingly began in the dark hills beyond and was quietly rolling past people having the noisiest night of their life. And in the center of this delta of dreams was some sort of altar on an island in the water, some sort of fire rising from the earth. And circled around it was a peaceful cluster of muddy monks, standing shoulder to shoulder in silence, while up to their shins in water. And as I wove into their mix, this sacred circle was surrounding a giant peace sign made out of hundreds of the Oxfam candles. And each of these solemn saints was engaged in the unspoken task of lighting all 500 candles at once, so the entire peace sign would burn united. And as one would gently bow down to spark a light on one of the candles, his body breeze might extinguish a lifetime of birthdays. Or a soft whisper of Mother Nature would quietly hush through their legs and nearly snuff out the dream completely. But no, these pious mutes were not deterred. United in hope, united they stood, searching and striking, bending and lighting, bonding and enlightening each other in a steady procession of action, solidifying themselves against the storm. Once more, bend, once more, bend, once more, bend, until they've done it. Making peace, 500 candles all burning in harmony in a circle in the mud. And surrounding the flames flickered the beaming faces who made it happen, cheering together their united flame in a sea of mud. And beyond this circle, we'd been burning together all weekend. And now we were pulling it off in the mud again. Thousands of lifelong friends who finally met, all playing the same game without rules or frontiers being stated or winners declared. And as we were cheering this great flame of peace, off in the distance, St. Peter came back for a final encore. Somewhere far away, a drum beat began, a slowly rising heartbeat playing a tribal rhythm, a patterned intro of yes, in your eyes. And in our ears came Yusu Nadur's angelic voice, pouring into the song like cream into coffee as the audience began to catch on and rise with him in a chorus of flame-flickering joy, of river bodies dancing naked, whether clothed or not, of our collective unconscious exploding in the twilight gleaming of Sunday's night. As all the reaching out from the inside that this song has ever evoked suddenly came rising through my throat, through my eyes, right in front of me, I was unavoidably facing the unfaceable. Every moment of not speaking, every battle not waged, every voice not raised, every step not taken, rising through my eyes, rising from the inside, rising. Every strength of conviction convincing me now, not again. Every moment of truth doubted, never again. I reach out from the inside and come alive, reborn from the center, from the truth, from the heart, from now on. Whether this song, this weekend, or something more, somehow everyone became whatever they wanted, at least for a night or a weekend, with the possibility of life. Free for all that ever confined. Whatever dream was yearning to reach out from inside, there was spark enough here for lifelong ignition. Somehow, through the magic swirling ship of In Your Eyes, I found myself standing on the very top row of the VIP bleachers again, overlooking the cheering field for the final song of the final set of the final night. I was perched on solid ground for the first time in days. My heart was racing to the beat of Gabriel's quest. God, there's no turning back. Somewhere out in the jungle darkness, a new rhythm arose. A haunting, rhythmic, native drum. A distant tribe. A beating trance. A call to all to dance tonight. And echoing through the craggy canyons came a voice. 25 years ago, people believed you could change the world if you fought for justice, if you fought for what you believe in, if you fought for your dreams. This is your Woodstock. This is your Wonderland. These are your dreams. And the spirit of Biko rose from the earth, summoning us from the bell towers of revolution and revelation, ringing through the night, chiming in the freedom spirit and calling us to the village green. The soul of independence flew in circles above our rabble-rousing, candle-bearing uprising, our pitched voices, our tuned forks, our half-million-voiced choir gathering before an altar of music, holding flames on high to all those before us who wrote, sang, and played before us, who died for the freedom of flight before us. Our chanting, singing spirit soared. If you fought for what you believe in, kept echoing, echoing, echoing now. No body, no more. Releasing the spirit balloon and drifting up from the earth, from the body, by a drum, a voice, a haunting tribal jungle beat in a chanting mystic nightfall heat. Drifting high through the mist like a dream, a drum, Macbeth doth come. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Floating, floating, free as spirit, Fire burn here and near it. Above this earth, above Woodstock, you're free to roll if you're free to rock. Through kaleidoscopic prisms, scattering moonlight into rain, scattering sunshine out of pain, scattering dreams into streams of ringlet reams, twirling over the flower glades of yesterday's past. And new scenes flew open like shutters in a storm. Flashing mud clay sculptures backed by candlelight, tribesmen dancing entranced in circles, flame flickering faces smiling in bronze, weaving and swaying, believing and staying, enhanced by moon dance and trialed by fire. A mighty midnight breezing blast billowed our sails and hoisted our hearts, not extinguishing flames, but blowing our dreams like saxophone solos through the skies of our songs, scattering our spirits like stardust in the wind, floating as one to the horizon beyond and joining the stars, the pearls of the heavens, the stardust we are, the golden we glisten. And St. Peter was singing like a fluttering angel in the night clear sky night as our spirit balloon floated back to earth, back to where people were swaying gently in a lullaby cradle at the rocking hand of God. Colored spirits spiraled up with the smoke. Embers flickered in the starry night and blazed on the hearth fire heart center of the soul. Thunderous, bone-shaking drums held 1,000,000 as one, sending us off in boats on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies, where sugar plum fairies made dreams come true and visions dance on water shine. As Gabriel sang in the winds of change, blowing through the trees, through our souls, through our cells, through us all, through the world, behind our sails, behind you now, behind tomorrow when you rise, behind your comeback when you fall, behind your dreams unseen by all. This is your Woodstock. These are your dreams. He said, of the ones that come true on top of the mountain, within your heart, until they speak in a neck-tingling, leg-dancing, shiver-me timbers that spikes your soul and strikes your life and makes it whole, beaming the goal of your character's role. No one else sees it but you. You've got it. You see it. Nobody else but you. You know it. Nobody else. You see it. Nobody else inside you. Now, flickering, flickering, flickering now. And what happens now is up to you. As the mystic minstrel waved goodbye, and what happens now is up to you. A drum beats in the distance. And what happens now? A drum beats. A drum beats inside. And what happens now is up to you. A drum beat begins to fade to cheering as candles flicker. And out of the candles flicker, glowing and growing from the field of life, the field at night, a glowing ring of fire begins to take over. A flaming ring of flickering peace, a raging circle of dancing men, a rising voice of singing women, 1,000 voices merging together. Human voices rise, rise, rising above the field. Human voices rise, crying out on a limb of pious pagans dancing in tongues around a circle of light, a sign of peace, a resounding choir rising from the field, rising from the field, pulling us, God help us, pulling us in to the chanting circle, to singing unbounded, to free me, free me, free me for real, free me for once. And all we are saying, all we are praying, all the spirits are swaying, the field all is one. And all we are saying, John is here smiling. All we are saying and all we are swaying, locking arms and spinning faster, locking arms and spinning faster, and the Spirit still faster, arm in arm with God in the mud, with God in the light, spinning faster. And all we are saying, all we are swaying, all we are praying, it's all in our hands. And all we are holding, one and sister, brother, lover, all, 1 in 1,000,000 to 1,000,001 in a mud splashing, arm locking, swirling dance, twirl, All we are saying is, let's stay together. All we are saying is joined at the heart. And all we are saying is kindness to all. And all we are saying is spinning together. And all we are saying is burning inside. And all we are saying is no turning back. And all we are saying is raging inside. And all we are saying is keep it alive. And all we are saying is stoke the improbable, light the impossible, fan the invisible, be the invincible spirit you are.